All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is Thursday, right? Thursday, the 5th day of September. Week is almost done. I've got one more day tomorrow. We'll do the free-for-all. And I believe we have a Monday Arlen coming up, or an Arlen Monday, I guess is how I should put it. Not a Monday Arlen, but an Arlen Monday. But he is Monday Arlen, right? Because he comes on Monday. The first word would be the adjective in English. So, yes, Monday Arlen will be with us this Monday. I used as the thumbnail the Liz Cheney endorsement. I think that came out since the end of yesterday's program. By the way, if you want to talk to me, I really do want to hear from you. 240-242-5646. I'll get to Cheney in a moment, although that she will not be the focus of the program. We did get a caller, or at least there was an attempted caller yesterday. She couldn't get through. She posted about this on Halitics. I ran some tests. We actually ran tests together, and it seems like there may be some incompatibility between her phone and my system. Other calls got through. So I'm not sure what the problem is. But if you have trouble getting through, do put it in the chat. Do text me. Put it anywhere. But the best place where I'll always see it, besides if you have my actual cell phone number or you have my email, but also just in Halitics on Facebook. And you should join Halitics if you're, if you're not, especially if you don't like to call. You can't watch my program live. You don't want to get on the stream, then the best place to comment is Halitics, and there's always a good back and forth, the dialogue. That's what we're about. We're about a dialogue here. We're about trying to come up with solutions to really, really serious problems. So if Liz Cheney endorses you, are you the answer? Does that make you the answer to the problem? I think what Liz Cheney and certainly her father, Dick, and I don't, the sins of the father don't necessarily fall on the daughter as well, right? I mean, you could break from your parent. We've seen lots of, especially high-profile political children, often do disavow their parents' politics. Ronald Reagan Jr., right? He moved away from his dad. So you don't have to be the same kind of person as your father in politics. By the way, I have two ovals up there. Looks a little ridiculous. Let's get rid of one of those. But Liz has always been a huge fan of Dick's policies. He's one of the worst actors we've seen in American politics in the past 100 years. I'd actually say he's below being worse, his president, W. In some ways, I think Dick Cheney was more of an unapologetic supporter of torture, for example. And Liz Cheney's always been there with her dad. In one area, she was worse. When it came to her sister, Dick's daughter, Mary, he was willing to embrace. He embraced her marriage to another woman. This was a bridge apparently too far for Liz Cheney. I'm sure she frankly couldn't care less, but she was at that point in time running for Congress in a pretty conservative state, the cowboy state, Wyoming, and I guess she felt maybe it would negatively impact on her chances to win. But regardless, she did not accept publicly her sister's marriage to another woman. Now, the idea that she would modify her views to placate the Wyoming electorate does actually seem to unlikely for several reasons. One, although Wyoming is certainly a pretty conservative state, rock rib Republican, it's not so much conservative in the social social issue sense like the South is, right? The religious conservative sense where gay marriage would be anathema. But it's more very conservative in the gun rights and economic rights. There's a lot of billionaires who live in the Jackson Hole area, and they've had influence over the state. A lot of ranchers who just want government completely out of their lives. There's a sort of a libertarian streak even, which would suggest that gay marriage wouldn't be a big problem in Wyoming. And my sense is it might not be. So perhaps Liz really is just a bigot and doesn't accept same-sex unions. That may be part of it. Also, to be fair, she did support in impeaching Trump, and that did hurt her chances for re-election, in fact. it ended her chance for re-election. She might have lost anyway. She wasn't so popular in Wyoming, but I'll give her this much. She does seem to sometimes state what she believes, even if it's perhaps going to negatively impact on her re-election campaign. And I think she clearly doesn't think Donald Trump should be our next president. And I don't disagree. He shouldn't be. But neither should Kamala Harris. And her endorsement, Liz Cheney's endorsement of Harris, suggests to me the limits of the old adage, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So I certainly think in many ways Donald Trump is my enemy. He was a very bad president in a lot of ways, and definitely showed himself. The fangs came out on January 6, 21. I think there's a lot of ways he was unfairly treated, certainly by Democrats. That's par for the course in politics, but by the media as well. But that said, he did many terrible things, and the worst was trying to stay, really aggressively trying to stay in office when he had been voted out. And then the next worst thing, which was also really, really bad, is the horrible, abusive treatment of immigrants. That's just wrong. It's just immoral. It's just criminal. And those are two areas where Trump was just awful. There's many others. I'm not going to go into all of them. So, I have no problem with Liz Cheney, who is a torture apologist, who has a record. Now, she wasn't president, but a record that was in many ways as bad as Trump's. So she was an all-in for the Iraq war. She wasn't in power at that time, but she's never suggested there was anything wrong with it. So Cheney is a bad actor. Trump is a bad actor. They're enemies of each other, but neither one is my friend. So there's a limit, clearly, to the old adage, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. She clearly believes that because Kamala is Trump's enemy at this moment, that is, Liz Cheney's friend would be Kamala. That's fine. She's entitled to that opinion. But the fact that Liz Cheney supports Kamala Harris suggests to me that Kamala Harris is not a good option. Because if it were Bernie running, Liz Cheney wouldn't endorse him. Obviously, Liz Cheney wouldn't endorse Jill Stein. So when you have a good choice, a good option, Cheney's not going to endorse them. So no, I'm not looking at the Cheney endorsement as anything but an argument for Jill Stein. We'll hear a little bit. I'll play it. Why not play the clip? It's very, very brief. The situation in the Middle East continues to be awful. The countries, the regions around Israel are just getting hammered. The death toll now getting close to 41,000, the official death toll, that is, from Israel's genocidal campaign in Gaza. And I was pleased. I don't know if I want to say pleased. Maybe that's the wrong word, but the death toll a little bit less than we've seen in recent days, where the numbers tend to be in the upper 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, hundreds. So only, in quotes, because obviously it's a terrible number, 17 reported killed by Israel in Gaza over the past 24 hours. So that maybe offers us a little bit of hope that Israel may be winding down operations. But we know that they made it very, very clear that they are not going to leave Gaza. They are going to continue their occupation, that they demand control of the western entry into Gaza. That means they would take it over from Egypt. So this brutal occupation will continue. The maintenance of the Palestinian people in that concentration camp between the Mediterranean Sea and the desert is going to continue unabated. And, I continue to use the word genocide. They're eradicating these people. They're wiping them off the face of the map, is what Israel is doing. And it's horrific. Our government is clearly, the Biden-Harris administration is clearly complicit in this. And there's my little slide there, backed by the Biden-Harris administration. Israel's killed over 40,875 Gazans since October 7th. And they killed 17 yesterday, was the number we had. Now, I will point out, now again, if Israel backs off, if it, stops the killing, that doesn't mean they're not engaged in a long-term genocide. They're clearly have to decide what they're going to do. And they may recognize the pressure internationally, even if the U.S. isn't part of it, to tamp down the killing. Let's hope. That's certainly my hope. But whatever optimism or whatever reduction in pessimism we might have from a less deadly day in Gaza has to be tempered by the recognition that Israel's also lashing out in the West Bank against Palestinians. And the death toll there surges to 39. Now, that's not overnight, but that's in the past week. And we've seen 8 children and 2 elderly among the victims. This is what Harris, Biden are doing. There's no, I don't see how we can support that. I just don't see that. I don't see how we can be okay with that. And by okay, I mean saying, okay, well, then I'm going to vote for a vice president who's running for president who has made it absolutely clear she's going to support every single thing Israel does, regardless, period, end of story, which means continuing an occupation, continuing a genocide, or at minimum eradicating the people of that, eradicating their existence as an entity. The Palestinian people are, for Israel, a problem that they just want it to go away. And if they can push them into Jordan, if they can just simply eliminate their status as an ethnic group, that's what Israel's trying to do. And I won't support a candidate who is part of that, who's behind that, who's with that. And she's made it absolutely clear. The Republicans have made the point that maybe Kamala's not as bad as we think she is, as I think she is. They're kind of propping her up as kind of a decent person. And this was at the Republican Jewish Coalition's annual donor conference yesterday in Las Vegas. So what the story there is, well, maybe she's really not as bad as we think. So throughout the night, let's get this up for you. This is again and this is my post on Facebook. Throughout the night, the speaker sought to cast Harris as an anti-Israel radical. So they're propping her up. They're saying, wait a second, she's not going to continue to back the indiscriminate murder of Palestinian civilians. They're saying, the Republicans are, her election would empower the activist left. Wow, that would be really good. And it might embolden Iran and imperil the chance of defeating Hamas, which isn't going to happen anyway. So, is Harris not that bad? No, she is. The Republicans obviously are just saying, hey, wait a second. We can't let her steal our thunder. We can't let her go to the Democratic National Convention and go on CNN and say, oh no, I'm all in for Israel. I'll always be providing the bombs. I'll always be providing the weapons that Israel needs. And she says in self-defense, but obviously just to simply lash out and kill people. And we can see from her record, I mean, I've presented this before over and over. But I think it's a pretty instructive. Now, we're going to get to a policy where she's pulled back from a Biden policy. And that might be a good thing if the Biden policy were a bad policy, such as arming Israel. But the latest is Harris is, at least when it comes to tax policy, she's worse than Biden. This is not one of Biden's worst areas, by the way. There's a certain level, I guess, of populism. He has a populist streak. He has a certain recognition, probably based on the fact that he's a pretty, is Biden's not even a boomer, I don't think. No, he's even beyond that. He's like greatest generation, whatever you want to call it, World War II generation. He, vaguely in the back of his mind, he can remember a better time for middle-class Americans. Time when people actually, could live a decent life on one salary, who could own a home, who could send their kids to college. He can remember that time, and he remembers that was when tax rates on the wealthy were north of 70%, north of 90% when Ike was president. And in many ways, that was a golden era for America's middle class and working class. So Joe Biden has that in his memory banks. Kamala Harris doesn't. And she is not beholden to soaking the wealthy. She is beholden to the wealthy. And you can see this. She proposes an increase on the capital gains tax far less than what Biden floated. So she's pulling back on a policy that actually was pretty good, right? He wanted to jack up the capital gains tax to be exactly the same as the income tax. And I think the theory there, and we've heard this is like the Warren Buffett theory, is, hey, I make my money, Warren Buffett has said, by investing, right? I put my money here and I put my money there, and I'm really smart and I'm really good at it, which is obviously true. And I'm now a billionaire, a multi-billion, I'm one of the richest people the world has ever seen in, millennia. But it's not right that because I'm good at investing and I have billions, I pay less in tax than my secretary. So what Biden proposed is the tax on capital gains. You invest money and you keep it in a stock for long-term capital gains over a year, should be the same as the tax on ordinary income, which I think makes perfect sense. I don't see why the tax code should distinguish between the two. If we had a capital gains tax rate that was at the same level as income, we'd see it at 37%, but now it's at 20%. Biden proposes to increase that top tax bracket to 39.6%. There'd be a surcharge for super rich people, and he wants the capital gains tax to mirror that. I think that's right. I agree with that. The argument for a lower capital gains tax is we want to incentivize people to invest. Well, there's a lot wrong with that. First of all, people are going to invest regardless. I mean, they're not going to not invest if they have to pay higher taxes on their gains. You can deduct your losses, so it kind of washes out. Whatever your loss is, you'll receive the same tax credit as your gain would be. So to that degree, there's no disincentive to invest, even if the tax rate on your gains increases. In addition, you don't pay the tax until you realize the gain by selling your stock. People still work even when their tax rate goes up. And in fact, we have a little bit of data on this from the Tax Policy Center, which examined, kind of compared whether there were reductions in investment by affluent people when the capital gains rate is higher. Capital gains tax rate is higher. Does a higher capital gains tax mean wealthy people invest less money? Does it mean entrepreneurs are less likely to start companies? Conversely, does a lower capital gains tax rate mean there's going to be more investment? And the answer is no. The record is very equivocal. It doesn't really tell us anything. But what it does, except that when you have a disparity between the capital gains tax and the ordinary income tax rate, you have these tax avoidance schemes. People pay accountants to come up with all sorts of fancy ways to pay less taxes, and the code gets more complex. Those are all bad. That means that's inefficient. It's inefficient to distinguish between capital gains and ordinary income for tax purposes. It's a bad idea. We shouldn't do it. And Biden, to his credit, recognized that and said, yeah, let's not do it. Another problem with lowering the capital gains tax, there's two big. First of all, in general, wealthy people are the ones who have capital gains, right? Wealthy people invest. Poor people don't have the luxury of investing. Middle-class people generally put their money in bank accounts, and if they do invest, they have 401ks and the like. A lot of that is tax protected until retirement. And then even after retirement, they're not making 7 figures, which is where that new top tax rate would be. You have to over $1 million in income. So the basic beneficiary of lower tax rates on capital gains are the billionaire class and the very wealthy millionaire class. So that's a problem. This will exacerbate, or it will not reduce. Now, Harris still proposes raising the capital gains tax, which is at an ultra low 20%. Trump wants to make it 15%. He's even worse. He's much worse. This is one area where Harris is clearly not as bad as Trump. But regardless, we've got this enormous national debt. And one way, the way you reduce the debt, you address the debt, is you raise taxes on the wealthy. You don't lower them or keep them super low, which is what Harris is proposing. She's saying, well, they shouldn't go up to be the same as ordinary income. We should distinguish. Rich people should get tax breaks that other Americans don't. It's not the right policy. She's going in the wrong direction. She's distinguishing herself from Joe Biden in a way that is problematic. Now, I'm going to kind of delve into this because I think not because I think tax policy is particularly fascinating, because I don't, but I do think it's particularly important. And I read this article from the Monterey Herald today because I subscribe to that. And this guy, Zach Harney, I really kind of wanted to center him. I wanted to platform him because he's a local. He wrote for the Herald. I guess he deserves a little bit of publicity for that if anyone sees it or notes it. So, and I thought he did a good job with this column as well. He points out, now he says 44.6%. There's no 44.6. There's right now, the top rate is 20% on capital, or the top long-term rate is 20%. And then there's a surcharge on that. But yes, Biden floated going up to 39.6, which would be his top ordinary income tax rate. And Harney's real clear. As written, if it's enacted, which it almost certainly won't be, it would only apply to people with over $1 million in income. And then that surcharge only applies to income above $400,000. So you have to have over $1 million to be at that 44.6% rate. Very few people would ever have to pay it. Only the richest, who without question can afford it. But Harney does provide one example where we would look at this and say, well, maybe that 44.6% is a little high in this particular case. And I think it's a fair example. I absolutely do. So he says, imagine a small business owner. Like I was saying myself, I bought that radio station in Monterey, didn't work out, took a bath, lost money, was able to deduct it, paid a little bit less in income, certainly wasn't as much as I lost, but, I'm not happy about it. But what if the radio station had been a success and it had increased in value? And I worked really, really hard, which I did, and I, took a modest income. He's saying, around 120,000, which in California is not, that's middle class. The business appreciates, or he started it from the business owner. They started from scratch, and it's appreciates by $3 million. They sell it in 1 year. Well, if you had that 44.6% tax in effect, the $3 million wouldn't be subject to it, but because the first $1 million would be subject to a much lower tax and graduated, but the second $2 million would be, and 44.6% of $2 million's what, about $900,000, something like that, a little less. So they would wind up netting probably under $2 million from their business that was worth $3 million. I think we might look at that and say that doesn't seem totally fair. Maybe that's a little bit high. So my solution to that problem isn't to eliminate or to reduce the top capital gains tax rate, which should still be 39.6. It should be taxed at ordinary rates. And I would note that this is a rare example. I mean, there are business people, of course, who sell their businesses every year. But the major beneficiaries of the lower capital gains tax rates are, just wealthy people. Heirs. The heirs of billionaires. The heirs of multimillionaires. Who might, that you inherit $100 million, you invest at 2 or 3%, 4%, you get good returns, you're making many millions. They're the ones who need to pay this tax. Now, yeah, the small business owner, what I would do is what's actually proposed by Biden for his wealth tax, which is, well, he doesn't quite propose it the way I do in this case, but spread it out. Say, okay, my profit, my capital gain was $3 million, but it was a complete, it was a one-time event. It's not like every year I'm making millions in my investments, like some people do. A small business person. So what I would propose, and this would also work for, say, athletes and entertainers who may have 1 or 2 or 5 great years and then never come close to the kind of income they saw when they were, in the NBA, or they were a movie star for a few years and then their star faded, right? They were on a TV show that was a huge hit, and then it's canceled, and then they're not making any money at all. So you get to spread that income out over a 5-year period. So the $3 million, defer some of it. Each year you have to realize, you have to realize 20% of it, and put it in a escrow or some way like that. You don't just put it all in your bank account, put it in some kind of an escrow account, and then you pay on the gain 20% each year for 5 years. If your income, if your gain was $3 million, you wouldn't pay that. You wouldn't be over $1 million in any 1 year. You wouldn't be at that rate. If your gain was $10 million, yeah, you would. You'd be at $2 million. Seems like it would be a fairer way to go. Now, for someone who's a billionaire or making millions every single year, the deferral doesn't help you. Because, sure, you pay 20% the first year of, let's say you made $5 million, you pay 20%, $1 million, but the next year you make another $5 million, and so on and so on. So you'd have to, it would aggregate to a point where you'd be at, your income your actual income would be, you'd be paying taxes on rather than a deferral. So, but it would be useful for those who have that one-time event that makes them a lot of money. So I think that's the solution, not Harris's, where she's touting herself, presenting herself as an ally of small businesses. Hey, you worked so hard, you built that business up, you bought that little shop and it turned out to be a big success. You're an online retailer and you sold your business and now you have to pay all these taxes. That's a one-time shot, one-time tax hit. That I would defer. But I wouldn't have a lower tax rate, a lower capital gains tax rate. So again, Harris, she's listening to the billionaire class. She's pulling back on a policy that they don't like, even though it's a good policy. But when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to Israel, no, let me be perfectly clear. I'm unequivocally with Israel. I will always support Israel no matter what, right? That's her position. She's not listening to the victims. She's not willing to condition bombs on Israel. Well, I mean, I don't think Israel needs bombs at all, but she's not willing to even condition it on they stop bombing civilians. They stop bombing residences. Israel stops bombing hospitals. We can see exactly where her priorities lie with a billionaire class. I can't vote for someone who's got that view, who's made it absolutely clear that her values are so different than mine. You have a disagreement? You think I'm wrong? Let me know. 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. Yesterday I played, I don't think I played this guy, but I played the AOC video where she criticizes Jill Stein for the lack of for the relatively, for the very small footprint that the Green Party has in American politics, for its inability to elect people, for the movement's relative lack of success. And I thought this was a remarkable attack by AOC because her movement has shown no success. Her movement has shown no growth. Her Dem Enter, her squad hasn't done anything effectively. So for her to point the finger at Jill Stein's pretty absurd. It also irritated me because why aren't you helping Jill Stein? Why aren't you trying to build the Green Party, since the Green Party's values are at least a lot closer, AOC, to what you claim to espouse? Instead, all you can do is use the Green Party's lack of success as a cudgel to insist that people fall in line and vote for one of the two evils, one of the two great evils, the Democratic candidate. Well, that's just wrong-headed. You have an obligation, AOC, to come up with to fight for solutions that can work. And the one you've been fighting for clearly hasn't worked. Right? Your squad is smaller than it was. And it's less effective. It hasn't had any policy successes. So how dare you attack Jill Stein? I had this clip queued up yesterday, but I'll play it now. This is this guy, David Dole. There have been times when I kind of like David Dole. He calls himself the Rational National. Let's hear what he has to say.
I'm sorry. I'm just saying it because...
So let me just stop it there. Yeah, so we already heard this, but, we might as well hear it again. This is from the Dole, the Rational National, and he platforms or centers AOC, and it's irritating. It really is, but let's hear it again.
As a person, I endorse Working Families Party candidates. I endorse DSA candidates. I take risks, and
so
I
really
endorse
said what a load of crap that is. She doesn't take risks. She endorses Democratic candidates who may have received the endorsement of DSA or who Working Families Party has also put on their ballot. You can't do that in Maryland, by the way. You can only run as a candidate of one party, not two. So you're not taking risks, AOC. So that's just a lot.
Primaries against Democrats when it's merited. What does this person do to grow power?
All right. So this right here is 99.9% accurate. The reason why it's not 100% is because slight correction here. Howie Hawkins did run in 2020. It wasn't Jill Stein.
Well, it's not a slight correction. We talked about this yesterday. AOC says you run for office in 4 elections straight and you've got nowhere. Well, it's not a slight correction. She did run in 2012, which I didn't mention yesterday. I wasn't certain about that. She ran in 2012, 2016, 2 elections in a row. Donald Trump running in 3 elections in a row, by the way. She ran in 2. She did not run in 2020. And she wasn't planning, Jill Stein that is, to run in 24. She only ran because I think a better option would have been, she thought a better option was Dr. West. He, for whatever reason, his reasons of his own, abandoned the Green Party. And she has talked about how she and Ajamu Baraka, who is her vice president choice in 2020, decided, not 2020, she didn't run 2020, Hawkins ran. In 2016, how she urged Ajamu Baraka to run. And he decided he wasn't going to, so she felt she had to. So that's a very unfair criticism, frankly, a dishonest one. And it's a lot more than a 0.4% wrong. It's like 50% wrong for her to say, for AOC to have said that.
Fine, but it's been Jill Stein since 2012. Now, my issue isn't even necessarily Jill Stein. It's how the Green Party generally in the U.S. operates. So you have here, this is the reality with the Green Party. Seats in the Senate, obviously,
so
0.
There's virtually no Green Party nominees who win. Virtually no Green Party candidates win. That's true. He's right. And it's very upsetting. It's very disappointing. But if that's the problem, which it is a big problem, of course, then, Dole, why don't you take it head on? Why don't you try to elevate the Green Party? Why don't you promote the Green Party? Or if you don't think the Green Party is the right vessel for bringing about change, then elevate another party. Come up with a different strategy that has a chance to succeed. But you don't do that. You don't support the party in your podcast. You're right now saying don't vote Green. And not only that, you don't have any other solutions either. It's just, oh yeah, vote for the squad, vote for Harris. So it's a ridiculous criticism. Podcasters with big audiences have influence. Together, this is something Brianna Joy Gregg recognized. She's trying to get people to vote for Jill Stein. I'm very disappointed in the Do Dissidents bros because they're not supporting, they sort of are supporting Jill, but they're doing it in kind of a backhanded way. I don't like that. RBN, Revolutionary Blackout Network, is supporting Stein. But if there was a real groundswell among so-called progressive podcasters for the Green Party candidates and against the Democrat Party, that would build a movement. We could build a movement that way. And Dole's clearly would rather throw sand in the machinery than build that progressive movement. That's not an ally. That's not a real progressive. A little more from Dole.
Here is the Green Party itself, the Green Party, the apparatus, whatever function exists in the party, whoever works at the Green Party.
There's virtually no one working in the party. Okay,
if you're not making
stop that, go away. I don't know how that happened. There's virtually no one in the Green. There are very few people in the Green Party. The Green Party has virtually no money, no assets, because who's going to contribute? People who have money are going to give to parties that are going to enrich them, are going to make their lives better. The wealthy will gravitate to candidates who support them. And that's Harris and that's Trump. But it sure as heck ain't. It's also to a degree RFK Jr. But what it isn't is a party that says, no, the wealthy need to pay much higher taxes. We all need Medicare. We guaranteed health care. We need to stop polluting our environment. We need to stop endless war. Sure, I feel that way. But in terms of having a sharp appeal for people who really can afford to give the kind of money you need now to succeed in politics, no. The Green Party just doesn't have that because it's trying to make things better by taking away from those who have, which is essential. You have to do it. There's only so much wealth and so much resources on the planet, and they've all been hoarded by a tiny group of people. Most have been hoarded by a tiny group of people, and they want to keep those. They want to keep their hoard. The media, they're not going to support a candidate who's against them, who recognizes they're complicit. So the Green Party has tremendous, has to go uphill, and it has had a lot of challenges. I get it. I think people should see through that crap, but they don't. But again, I think that's the duty of the progressive media, is to promote the one candidate who's actually anti-genocide, who's pro-peace, who's anti-endless war. Now, let me play a little bit from a different. This is Majority Report Sam Seder. I really dislike Sam Seder. I have a negative visceral reaction to him, much more so than to Dole. I never really had a problem with him. But I think here Seder's a little more reasonable.
And I do think, without a doubt, I mean, it's simply inarguable, the Green Party has diminished in power over the past 25 years. I mean, I say this as someone who voted for Ralph Nader as a way of, and I did it in New York. I mean, to be fair, you know, and I vote swapped with Florida, or I supposedly did back then. You know, the internet, you pledge. But the Green Party is.
All right, so I'll get to more, so I jumped up. But I was just really astonished, first of all, that Seder, I remember Seder used to broadcast in Monterey, not on my program, but not on my station, but he did broadcast a little bit. Actually, well, he was on Air America. Why would you support Ralph Nader? I mean, that was a terrible decision. Al Gore was a really good candidate. I know what he was saying. We vote swapped. But Nader was a narcissist. Nader took votes away from a good candidate, somebody who was better than what we had and who would have made things better, I believe. So I don't really fault him. Look, you want to vote for Nader and you vote swap with someone in Florida, that seems all right. I'm not going to sit there and condemn you for that, Seder. But that was a case where you had a pretty mediocre candidate, Ralph Nader, or worse. And now you're condemning Jill Stein, but she was elected to office, unlike Ralph Nader, who had never been elected to office. And she's run against really bad candidates from both parties, not good ones. She's really she's espoused policies that would make life better for average Americans, which, by the way, Ralph Nader really didn't do. So in all those ways, I think the decision to vote for Nader was far worse than your criticism of Jill Stein. But he's not being real. He's saying, hey, the Green Party is less influence. The reason the Green Party may have less influence now than it did when Nader ran is just because Ralph Nader was really famous. He was a household name. So him running on the Green Party brought a lot of attention to the party. That's all. I mean, that's the reason. It's got nothing to do, it's nothing negative about Jill Stein. We'll play a little more from Seder. Because again, what we have, you have somebody who has well over a million subscribers. He could move the dial. He could move the needle. And he's not. He refuses to. We'll talk a little bit about that here.
But when I look at Trump and I look at Harris, one of them is going to be president. That's just simply a fact. Jill Stein has no better chance of being
I'm
president.
going to stop it there. I know that's what a lot of you, he's saying, a lot of you believe. Hey, it's either Trump or it's Harris. So that's the end of it. I've got to choose one or the other. Of course, you could have said the same thing right in 2000, and I guess you did say it, and that's why you vote swap. But you could make the same argument. He gets that. He does get that, does Cedar.
President than I do. And someone can say, well, if you guys supported Jill Stein, other people might. Well, if people supported me too, I might be president.
No, it's different because you're not running for president. She is. So he's responding to the point I made, which is, hey, progressive hosts, progressive media should unite, should be a strong, powerful voice in support of Jill Stein. He's saying, well, I could run, and if people supported me, then I could get. Well, you're not running. She is. She could be the North Star for the progressive movement in this moment. You couldn't be because you're not running, Sam. Do you not get that?
I mean, it's just not going to happen. And so the point is that is there a 1% chance that Harris is better than Trump on Israel? And if I'm going to vote, that's what I'm going to use my vote for.
Because he's saying, as bad as Biden and Harris have been, and he goes on and talks about this, there's that chance, that hope, maybe she'll be better. No matter what she says on CNN, no matter what she says at the DNC, no matter how much she platforms false claims of sexual violence by Hamas, the weaponization of sex by Hamas, and ignores the brutality that's visited on Palestinians every day by Israel. No matter how much she does any of that, there's that 1% chance, and I'm going to vote for her based on that 1% chance. Well, there's also a chance maybe Trump would be better, right? He did say to Israel, you got to stop it. You got to get this over with. And I know that's been interpreted to mean finish the job, kill everyone in that enclave. But, you know, it might have meant just stop it. So we don't, there's always that small chance Trump could be better. And there are areas where the chances that are really, really important, where there's a lot more than a 1% chance that Trump would be better. Now, again, I don't think you should vote for Trump. I won't vote for Trump. I think voting for Trump would be a terrible thing to do. But if the argument is, well, there's a 1% chance Harris might be better on Palestine, and I'm going to vote based on that 1% chance. What about the much greater chance, really a certainty, that Trump will be better on Ukraine, which has been a disaster? You can see this is DW, so I looked it up. You don't know DW, that's just the German state. It's like the BBC for Germany. Deutsche World. Deutsche, they call it Welt, I guess, or Welle, but it's the same Germany world, it's the state news. This has been a disaster, and she's all in for it. There's been no attempt, there's been no effort by Biden and Harris to broker any peace. They've done just the opposite. So if you're going to vote based on a 1% chance that maybe things will get better, if my candidate gets elected on one issue that's really, really, really important, well, this is really important too. To me, it's not quite as important, but it's damn important. And look at the news. It's awful. This is from Deutsche Welle. I just took the headlines. No curating. Russian forces advance toward Ukraine's key logistics hub. Russian attack on Lviv kills at least 7. This is just the latest. Russian missile strike kills dozens. Ukraine's morgues push to identify dead soldiers. So our policy of supporting Israel has devastated Gaza. And our policy of supporting Ukraine has devastated Ukraine. The Biden-Harris policies have been horrific. The fruits of their policies have been horrific. I don't see how Cedar's argument in any way logically compels a vote for Kamala Harris. I don't see it. And he even gets it. He recognizes she's awful too. He's just like, well, she might be better. She might be. Of course. But I'll tell you who we know would be better. Jill Stein. All right, I do have the video. So let me just play this real quick. Look, I know my people that my associates, people that I meet, that I see see the world very differently. And they just, it's a binary world. It's either Trump or Harris, and you can't vote for Trump, so vote for Harris. I get that. But, but just because Liz Cheney tells me to vote for somebody, that doesn't mean I'm going to vote for them. To me, this is an argument to vote not for them. This is an argument to vote for, well, it's certainly not, I'm not going to vote for Trump. But it's an argument, it's an argument to vote for the person that Liz Cheney would never endorse. And that is Jill Stein. So, real quick, let's hear from the former Wyoming Congresswoman, Liz Cheney.
We have the luxury of writing in candidates' names, particularly in swing states. And as a conservative, as someone who believes in and cares about the Constitution, I have thought deeply about this. And because of the danger
I'm going to say that. She says she believes deeply in the Constitution. One thing that just jumps out at me, you don't seem to care about the cruel and inhuman punishment portion of the Constitution because you supported torture by your father's regime. And that's cruel and inhuman punishment. And you don't give a crap. So for you to present yourself as some constitutional scholar or some lover of the Constitution, it rings awfully hollow, Liz Cheney.
Donald Trump poses, not only am I not voting for Donald Trump, but I will be voting for Kamala Harris in this election.
All right, and she gets wild applause there. I'm not really clear what that crowd was, but they clearly liked what that statement by Cheney. And, if you agree, I think a lot of people would agree with what she said. I'm doing my best on this program to make the point that all the evidence suggests that Kamala Harris, no less than Donald Trump, would be a terrible president. Would be terrible for our environment, would be terrible when it comes to endless proxy war with Russia, and perhaps most importantly, would continue to support Israel's genocidal campaign against Gaza. I won't vote for that. You feel that's the right thing to do? Then what I ask you to do is call me and tell me why. Because I really want to hear it. I want to hear an argument that we can expect better. We can expect an improvement if we elect Kamala Harris, because she's made it very, very clear things won't get better. All right, I'll be back tomorrow for the free-for-all.